As all of you know, the title of this talk is Exploratory Study of Micro-Credentials in India. And this is a study he conducted in the context of National Education Policy 2020, which mandates several exit and entry points for students to earn certification, diplomas, or degrees. NEP 2020, as all of you know, also provides for banking of earned credits through an academic bank of credits. Original Global University and Nottingham Trent University were awarded an exploratory research grant by the British Council to study the potential interest for students in some parts of India to undertake a joint transnational education through a micro-credential program. Today's discussion will center on the findings of this study as well as we lead in earlier study done on EdTech industry. Over to you, Professor Ram.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether I'm on or not. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mosmi, and the participants here. And I don't know whether anybody is online or not, but I'm sure they can join if they do. I'm going to keep this particular session reasonably brief. I know that some of you have to go for classes after this. So I'll just jump into this in terms of, I'll first set the context in terms of what I'm going to discuss today. It's going to be based on, like Professor Mosby mentioned, there are two industry-oriented research studies that I have undertaken, and I talk about both of them and provide the linkages between those two as well. Right? And so one was done pre-COVID, and I'm sure that many of you have already done a lot of study on the impact of COVID on education and higher education. But I've taken a very different twist to that. And so my findings will kind of validate what you have already seen and heard in other research. And the stakeholders were also different. Right? And so this particular the second study was more related to the micro-credential programs, and Professor Mosmi and Raju there both had been involved in that in some capacity. So I'll touch on that as well and what the findings were and where they could take next. The third part of the seminar I wanted to touch on was on my take on the academic bank of credits. What I thought was a reality and what was being promised. So I wanted to touch on that as well. So I'll try to go fast, and this is going to be less of the literature review, the research methodologies, and the structures and stuff like that. It's going to be more focus more on the outcomes and the survey procedures and things of that nature in this particular seminar. So having said that, the first one started just about when the COVID hit us, and we had started some of the preliminary work before that. This was a JGU funded project, and this was to understand whether the EdTech companies can be a transformational force in higher education in India. So we collected data from this company called Traction, and they have large database of startup companies both in India and abroad. So we had initially identified about 5,000 companies that were considered EdTech, but out of that we approached about 2,500 of them because they were the ones that were active at that point in time. The rest were not active, and they were in like 7 or 8 different segments of the education industry, from certification programs to assessments to teaching to foreign languages. Teachers training, etc. There were K-12 versus higher ed. So they were in different pockets. So we had sent surveys to about 2,500 companies. We got a fantastic response of 138, which probably represents about 4% or so. Which I was told that is not a bad success rate ratio. So we did focus on COVID response because we had just about in March. I actually presented the earlier portion of this in a tech seminar in Gurgaon, March 4th and 6th in 2020. And then we had just started the survey. So it was related to how the national education policy is being viewed by the tech industry themselves, and whether they're getting access to funding in the market, and what they are going after as it relates to the industry itself. So that was the intent of that, and again we went through a number of these 138 responses. They represented one or more of these different services that we offer, and the results were not very surprising in terms of what they said. They did anticipate at the time that the expansion is going to happen significantly. So about 25 of them indicated that they were going to double their existing revenue share, and about 50% of them said they're going to grow at least 40%, right? So that is the first telling moment for us, saying that they anticipated that tech is going to be used and consumed by the mainstream, education sector. But then on the other hand, we found that about 40% of them felt that it has not gone mainstream at that point in time. Right? This is right about the time we started the online education process. On the other hand, as it relates to this set of questions that we asked about the government policy and programs that was initiated, whether it is related to the digital digital India program or other types of AI programs that are being initiated, we asked questions around whether they felt that there is they are aware of the programs and whether they were utilizing or not. While there was a fairly 50-50 ratio around awareness of the programs, but as it related to the use of those programs was minimal. Because mostly the public sector, publicly funded tech companies, they were the ones who were using the government programs. Private companies did not utilize those government funds or programs because they felt that the bureaucracy was still very high. And so there were subsequent questions to that as to why we didn't use them was because they felt that it was still not frictionless. So there seemed to be a lot of bureaucracy as it relates to access of funds and markets and such. So the other question was whether the government had done enough or not. As you can see, a very small percentage of folks said that no, not really, they have not done much at all. Because at that time is when the national education policy was also being calibrated and debated, and so. But on the other hand, the market seems to feel that while there is all this talk about policies, but as it relates to actually helping the industry, there was not a whole lot of things that was going on. Right? So, which is somewhat not unusual. So we also asked them if you were to project yourself, 4 or 5 years from then. Again, this was done in 2020. What are the areas that you are going to emphasize on? And the things that came out was around AI, your virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, use of gaming and blockchain distributed technology and sentiment analysis, either to attract customers or to include them as part of their educational pedagogy. Right? So some of these things around behavior, sentiment analytics was more related to capturing the customers and also for testing purposes. Right? Those are the 2 areas that we focus on: behavior and sentiment, and the other areas were for general administration and the teaching pedagogy. And we asked them what do they want to do really. They said that they wanted to focus on expanding geographically, offer new products and services. They wanted to go abroad and do expansion. So it was very upbeat mode at that point in time. Again, if I ask the same questions now, maybe the storyline would be different, quite different, as yes. Right? So that is the kind of the study that in summary, that we conducted in 2019, late 2019, 2020. Okay? So I want to jump to the micro-credentials. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of these micro-credentials and certifications. They are definitely gaining in momentum around the globe. So it's especially in countries like in Europe, Australia, Canada. There is a tremendous interest both within the offering community and the consumers. So they want to get these micro credentials. These are short learning experiences, if you will, and especially became even more popular during the time. So it creates, and the focus was not primarily to become a degree holder. It was more to support the, from the work standpoint and how to become more relevant in the marketplace or to fill specific skill gaps. That was the intent. So again, the word micro credentials means different things to different people. There is no one unified, definition of what micro credentials is. The European Union uses it very differently than if you look at even Ireland or if you look at Australia, they have Singapore. They all use my word micro credentials in terms of what credits mean, what kind of assessments is required. They are all used very differently, and there are a number of research around that and papers written around these places, right? The word even micro credentials is sometimes used hyphenated, sometimes not. So even starting from that, there is a difference of opinion, right? So in the US, micro credentials is not that popular or not really taken off. Though it has started, if you start, there was a survey done by Gallagher and others that basically said that in the next 5 years, micro credential is where the education industry is going to be. And so, for example, the University of Buffalo in New York, they have actually created an office of micro credentials. Right? So there is some work being done there. So the micro credentials are not degrees, so that definitely helps with that with our new national education policy where they can exit out. Though they are calling them certificates, right, and diplomas, right? So we have to somehow get that whole micro credential concept into the playbook. That's not at this point. So again, these are all they were at one point in time started in 2001 or 2003. They were called as digital badges. So once you complete a particular thing, it's called as digital badges, and if you complete a few of them together, they were called as nano degrees, micromasters, and so on and so forth. So again, all meaning the same. Shorter than 2-year programs, and essentially it's an on-demand, skill-based, shareable program. That's a key thing there that I feel is will start differentiating the other things, right? To make sure that it's an on-demand program. It focuses on employment and wage growth. Some of the things that are being talked about by the World Economic Forum, they basically talk about this use of micro credentials as an employment and wage growth programs, and to ensure that there is, as the cost of education is growing as in every country, they want to see how they can advance education and make it more affordable as well. So that's part of kind of studying the cost of cost of education, and obviously the training programs will help them with their critical skills, no longer called it the soft skills, or they calling it impact skills. Those are the words that are used these days. So critical skills like team building, things like having the mental elasticity to go from one to the other, to be able to address questions of multidisciplinary problems, things of that. Right, that's what is focused on. Communication, personal growth, those are things that. So they do require assessment. They do provide credits, and what was called as digital badges, they call now credits. And these credits sometimes vary as 5 ELPS points in Europe to 20 credits in some Singapore or in Indonesia and Australia. So they vary very wide, and the number of hours. New Zealand again has got a very different program that they have set up, very different than other places. So this global push, there's several work that has been done. There is a quality and qualifications of Ireland. They have come up with a very interesting study on this whole aspect of early exploration into micro credentials in higher education. Right, this is done between 2014 and 2020. So they come up with a whole report on this. So while they started, the entire micro credentials initially started in 2013, it's become a lot more prevalent nowadays, right? So again, people from Bologna University, they have done a lot of research and work on that. The micro credentials in Bologna key commitments, what they wanted to do there in promoting that. So similarly, there's a program on European Union that have been pushing the concept of micro credential strength and credit transfer and credentialing. So that has been done by, there's a paper by Douglas and she has actually talked about what kind of credits and that needs to be done and what the transfer policy should be across different programs. Again, it is still a very early and nascent stage in terms of transfer of credits and so on and so forth, but there seems to be an emphasis on this. Right? So this is the 2025 market. What they anticipate, there's going to be something around $130 billion online degree microcredential market. So they anticipate this to go even further. Clearly, this is being done by some market firms, so always taking it as a solve. So as I said before, it keeps growing. But I thought this particular material around how do you differentiate in terms of whether they are credit bearing or not, credit bearing versus non-credit bearing, and whether they are bundled or whether they are non-bundled. Non-bundled means that there is a lot of different courses being offered as a standalone, but they are not necessarily put together, right? So, and then there are some very specific things around how you can categorize them as if you want to get into this micro-credential program, you can decide where you want to be, whether you want to be credit bearing or non-credit bearing, and then whether you want it to be bundled or not, right? So that's one way to look at the market and see how we can offer that. So this is just a quick primer on this. So I won't get into the details of this, but again, it's proof of learning outcomes, so that it is a short learning experience, you learn something new, and use that credit to apply for new jobs or apply for a specific role that you want to play in the same organization. So this project on microcredentials that so mostly mentioned, we won this grant from British Council through the Going Global engagement. This is an exploratory project, so we wanted to find out as to what is it, how can micro-credentials be used. Because I had started working on this, we applied for this along with NTU, Nottingham Trent University, UK, and we said because their focus, my British Council's the grant focus was on how do we promote SDG, how do you promote women's education, how do we promote some of the areas that have not typically gotten the funding, right? So our focus was on the northeastern states and what is called as the Bimaru region, which is the Bihar and I don't know what it's called, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Old Chhattisgarh, and all those things, right? So we had, so our interest was on the northeastern states primarily and on women. And so we had, reached out to the northeastern states through our contacts. We did probably reach out to about 30 colleges, mostly in Meghalaya, and some outside as well. But out of these 30 colleges, there were 930 responses. So thank you. I don't know what this is. You're caffeinating. You don't want me to sleep, right? So we had a pretty good response, and Raju can attest to that. We had 930 responses, and reasonably divided between male and female. And we focused the questions on the career plans, the students' career plans, which are all college students, and what kind of skills they are getting from their college education, whether they liked COVID study or they did not like COVID study. You know what I mean by COVID study, right? And so there was, because I wanted to connect the previous study to this, so I wanted to find out if, while the edtech companies were so upbeat on providing this online education, And obviously, a lot of studies have been come out which talked about whether the students like studying online or not, right? And so we had questions around that as well. And then also in terms of certification, would they want to go for a certification program or not? And how do they want it to be done? So then wanted to see whether there was any kind of discussion between male and female on those topics. So again, I will try to summarize this. This is a kind of a very busy chart. Most of them, about 50% of them wanted to pursue postgraduate program, right? After they finished their undergraduate, which is not, which may be very peculiar to Indian and South Asian context, but it may be very different if you go to the European or other Western countries. But there, a lot of people were doing that, or they were going into work. That was the next big thing that they wanted to do, working, especially in a government job, because we were focusing on the northeastern states. There are not many private industries, and so it was clear that they were looking for a government position. Right? That was the first summary finding. Now the question was also asked again. Most of them were in the second or third year students. They were not necessarily first year students. And the question was around whether the current education levels are meeting their future career demands or not. Right? And here, surprisingly, 45% of them said yes. But then if I combine the maybe to the no, there is about 60% of them are probably either nay or unsure, right? Because they still haven't thought through the whole process of their career and what it means, which itself could be telling in terms of. So that could be the market. If you're looking at it from an industry perspective, that could be the market that you can attract in terms of. Again, just a summary here. In terms of, there is a number of questions around the online learning experience. The predominant feedback was that it was either unacceptable or did not meet the expectation. I think we know this already. Only about a quarter of them said they are acceptable, and interestingly, about 13% of them said they did not study during COVID-19. So it is. I think it is a reasonably a significant number there. 13% of people were not even studying, so that's a. And the other may have been, just doing other things as well. So the other question was around their preferred mode of study. Physical classes was obviously the obvious one, and 20% said that they don't mind doing online classes. And hybrid was again a quarter of the respondents said, yeah, they would like to do hybrid courses, but online was the most preferred choice of any kind of study. Again, we had asked this question specifically relating to a certification program or a micro-credential program, and they said they would like to do it. The bottom line was that there was a significant agreement on the fact that they did want to take up a certification program. If this was offered, a premium certification was offered, they would want to do that. Most of our respondents were either doing BA or BSc. Those two undergraduate programs constitute about 3/4 of the respondents. Maybe because it was the colleges. Again, it was a very purposive sampling, snowball sampling. So there was no randomness here. We wish that we had a much larger time frame because we had to complete it within a matter of 3 weeks, and so we had to use those sampling techniques to get the responses as soon as possible. Willingness to join was very high. They said that you can offer something. Again, we didn't get into the commercials. We just said if there was a program that offered courses on future skills, digital technology, things of that nature, they said, yeah, we want to do this, right? And that is a significantly high proportion, like close to 90% of the respondents said, yeah, we want to do that. Again, once we attach the dollar value to that, then the responses may go down significantly, but we didn't want to go there, which I'll talk about in a moment. So that is part two of what I wanted to talk about. Again, there's a whole lot of things behind this. We have a report written as well, and about the questions that we asked, there are like 7 major questions, right, that we asked, and then within each of those 7 sections, we had a number of questions, and each of them could be analyzed further. So again, just purely descriptive analytics at this point in time. There was no other further analysis that needed to be done based on the data that we captured. Okay. So the third part of my thing is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the ABC research, mostly. The people who are, do I want to, you need to go into that?
NEP?
I'm specifically ABC.
They're all aware of it.
So ABC as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will skip through this very quickly because there is a growing interest in this whole, from the industry policymaker, there is this whole aspect of how do we connect this micro credentials into the ABC, right? And so I want to describe to you what this is. Each of, again, in NEP policy, they talk about each of them in little detail because they go from category level 5 to level 10 and so on and so forth. So I will not talk about that. So this is my take. You can challenge me on this. I don't have a problem. This is my personal take on what I feel about ABC, the hype. Okay, they talk about it being a very positive, forward-looking educational policy, but I think it has been. I mean, we'll come to what I feel. So this is the hype, right? Focusing on cognitive and critical skills. Obviously, there is a lot of emphasis on that. Going into humanities, not just focusing on science, like what was done before. They want to make sure that all these systems are being integrated across as part of the whole ABC process. They want to make sure all the 55,000 colleges across India should be able to accept the credits from any other universities and colleges. So that's part of the process. So here is what the reality I think is, and the reality is that they have created a whole new set of structures, right? I think most of you are aware of this. They've created new, for everything they have created a subsector, department, and it just seems to be more of a bureaucratic setup right now when the UGC is getting replaced by this Higher Education Commission of India, and then they have now started creating national education technology forums and so on and so forth, right? So there is a whole bunch of things that is being, they have, I think, 4 independent bodies within HECI for regulatory councils and so on. So there, it is just seems to be for me a more bureaucratic thing, right? The other reality I think that I think is they clearly are not sure. It is going to take some time to establish and operationalize this whole ABC. I think JGU has already signed up for that bank of credits, because if you go to the website, you should be able to see Jindal there as well. So, which is a good thing, but there are put some restrictions on what kind of institutions can be part of it, right? You have to be NIRF rank and etc. etc. So, so they're starting off with a very narrow focus and then try and expand. I don't know whether that's the right approach. My belief is that it should be open and there has to be quality assessments right away so that we can absorb more people. Otherwise, you're going to leave. If you do that way in a scaled manner, to achieve a 55,000 universities, colleges, you are going to take 10 years, 15 years like that. I think this needs to be accelerated, and it can be done in a much more meaningful manner. So how do I know that what I get from Ashoka University or some Jamia Millia University is of quality as what Jindal is providing, right? How do I know that some NEHU, Northeastern Hill University, is providing me the same level of quality as what the certification being given by Ashoka University, right? And that is going to take a lot of time and effort. I believe that this is the policy is good, but the initiation of the process should be predicated and preceded by setting of the standards, either in terms of assessments, either in terms of engaging with institutions to make sure. I don't know whether that's happening or not. This is just my take on it. Yeah.
We are working on a national qualifications framework. This is what we know.
Yeah, they are.
It's in process.
Yeah, this is what they call NHEQF. So that's what they're building out to ensure that.
Higher education qualifications.
So they're doing it in, along with the National Skills Foundation to establish that commonality between different the framework that has been created by the National Skills Foundation. So that the integration of vocational, because we talk about the multiple entry exit strategies. So if you are somebody is going to do a vocational program and they are getting a certification in air condition repair or plumbing or something like that, and then after 1 year or 3 years, they want to get into something higher, yes, it's a certified trained program, then they need to make sure that these ITIs that are established around the country, and that can get into an engineering type of institution. And that whole thing is being now devised in terms of qualification framework. So that's probably will take some time and effort for the. It's not easy. I mean, I'm not saying it is easy. Sitting here, we can easily, call the shots and say what we want to, but it is not easy thing. But that will take time. That's a reality. So just wanted to highlight that part of it. Apparently, GIs can only reserve 20% enrolling to agency, the rest have to be home institutions. So how pervasive this will become, how much it will catch on, not sure. Then the whole point of for them to upskill and move up, will, what you are now would do is to start creating more entry barriers. So if I want to have a student from Bihar or from Chhattisgarh or from Rajasthan to apply to good institutions in Bangalore or Bombay or in Sonipat, they will start competing. Then you start writing assessment examinations. So what you're thinking, what you're doing is you're making the process more and more difficult. Then you will have the CUETs and all these other exams to start filling. So it's an unknown devil that is behind the scenes here.
Philosophically, something which might feel like very sound in practical reality might not be,
Yeah,
it's like, it reminds me of this No Child Left Behind policy in the US.
Yeah.
Which became like something very based on very sound philosophy, but in practice actually did leave behind many more children over a decade.
Yeah,
since the policy came into being.
Or you can also say that one child policy from China, which was initiated in the 1970s, it has got longer term impact as well, right? It may have had a very good short term impact, but it's having long term impact. So, one needs to think through that and then operationalizing that, right? That the challenges have happened in the operationalizing of that, right? It also puts pressure on small colleges, now every small college would want to do that, and then again, what you're doing is you're creating ecosystems within ecosystems rather than making it a national, transferable policy. That I think is going to be the breakdown in what's going to happen, right? If anybody who is from a small town or a hill area is unable to participate in the process, they're still going to be very locally and regionally focused and centered, right? And so then the next thing is college administration, right? They will say, okay, now I'll only offer X number of electives because the rest will come through other colleges, right? So I think it's creating unnecessary friction and administrative overhead for colleges and for the students and learners themselves. So credits can be back only for 7 years. It may not be such a bad thing, but I feel if I look at myself, I decided to do my graduate level program after 10 years, right? So does that mean whatever I did, 10 years back is worthless? I know that during the, when you take CLAT and GMAT and stuff like that, they are generally valid for X number of years, but for entry or something. I don't know whether the credits themselves need, they can have a recertification or something to that effect. But again, that creates it another level of, it's okay to have, bank for a duration and tenure for these credits, but that has got implications. What does it mean to revive that, right? How do I revive those credits which are past the due date? 7 years and 1 day, can I ask for beg for forgiveness? And get it credit? I mean, there are all these kind of things, exceptions and stuff like that, which start showing up. Right? I have been similar to what we do face in college, right? They will say that okay, you have to wait 4 to 7 years to complete your education, right? So 7 years they're given, but then if there's somebody is on a deathbed for 2 months, are you going to give them exemption? So it just starts creating more and more administrative overhead. I don't know for the central agency and for the colleges, right? How do you do that? So there is some of that will happen. So they are saying that they are going to promote SWAYAM. I don't know how many of you have gone into SWAYAM network and seen that and use that. I think it's less said the better at this point in time, I think. But because they are now promoting not private agencies to promote their agencies, but it is being done through the government, right? So on one hand, they want to be very progressive and open it to the market. On the other hand, they want to have control through their own portals and platforms. And so I feel that is something that needs to be assessed. So the final thing for me is not final thing, but this is a bummer for me personally. Policy and transfer credit from foreign institutions. While they have opened up a lot of foreign institutions, they want to engage foreign institutions in India. At the same time, there is nothing written in the policy around whether they will allow credits earned from foreign institutions to be back, right? And so if Jindal and NTU now take our exploratory project to the next level, which we are now in the process of doing, and then we start offering this micro-credential program to our students. And part of it is being delivered by NTU, part of it is delivered by JPU. Will they be able to bank it? It's a very practical question, and at this point, the answer is no. Then, some of these associations and relationships will fall apart. So that's again, from my standpoint, it is not very practical. On one hand, when they talk about all the foreign colleges and or Indian institutions going anywhere and setting up offices in the institutions anywhere. On one hand, one section talks about that. On the other section, it kind of contravenes or doesn't say that you can do that. You can engage with foreign institutions. So that I find a little odd. So finally, one of the things I found was that special education, especially now, there is a much better awareness of people with special needs, and so if you need those special ed teachers or specific teacher training programs and stuff like that, I don't know why they cannot get experience, right? While we are providing for vocational skilled laborers, why can't it be done for professional teachers themselves? I mean, this is about education policy, so I see that this is a little hole there in terms of what they should be doing. So those are my view. This is not GPU's view, and definitely not your view. But this is my view. I feel that I need to be educated better, or somebody needs to tell me I am talking yes, and things will be improved or will be better. But this is where I feel that there's some work to be done for especially promoting micro credentials, which is equivalent to your 2 year certification program. So the micro credentials can become more relevant. Because certifications nowadays, IIM Bangalore does that. Every institution, even our Jindal provides certifications for 6 months. But for it to have some meaningful, nowadays it's considered as a motivator for employees to stay. Right? That's what these certificates are used for. Right? They send you to Harvard if you are a multinational company. You get a 3 weeks certification or 6 weeks education program, but it is just worth nothing, right? Even in terms of true knowledge and education. So they need to make it meaningful through micro credentialing, and that's what my feel is. Significant promise does not require an administrative process. It is very early stage of growth. So maybe 5 years from now, if we are meeting in the Big Bang boom, we may have a very different story to tell, maybe deep into it. So one of the things that we need to do is to ensure that employers, employees, parents, all of them are being taken into consideration when they are talking about the preparation program, right? They need to be prudent, especially for our and prudent in the agency. In addition to the certification. So that's basically my take on it. I promised you that I will let you go to your class on time. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Thank you so much.
Any questions, anyone?
This is really very interesting, and I have my own questions, but I would first request our research fellow Sandal who has raised her hands
Sure.
to ask the question. Go ahead, Sandal.
Good evening, sir. My name is Sandal. I'm a research fellow at RST. I want to understand how micro credentials are going to help in vocational courses, especially in the Indian context. When there's a student, or how are we even targeting vocational courses in India for for getting micro credentials?
How we are doing that right now?
Yeah.
Mostly through 2 means, I think. One is from the companies themselves, right? Vocational training. So, for example, if you look at HAL, right, the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or DHL, or Steel Authority, or even private companies, you take Wipro or Infosys, right? The way they do their quote unquote vocational training or skill upgrades, I want to call that skill upgrades, is through their own ongoing training programs, either just in time or otherwise, right? So they will say that you go and attend the 6 months training program, or 3 weeks training program, not 6 months, 3 weeks training program. That's how they're trying to fill that gap. The other way they were doing it was through the government sponsored agencies, the Skill Development Corporation of India. They wanted to upgrade the skills. They wanted to upgrade the skill of 40 crore Indians by 2025 or 2024 or something like that. And I don't think that program is going very well. So they were actually funding the companies to say that you conduct the training. If you can absorb those people whom you are trained, then that's the end of the program. So they were giving them 6,000 rupees per student, and then if you absorb them, they were giving them an additional 10,000 rupees per month. The government was funding these companies. But the problem was that there were a lot of institutions who signed up and did the skills training, but they didn't have the capacity to absorb it. So they did the training, they became welders, they became better welders, they became better electricians, but then it was dead end again. So I think that was the problem with the skill development. So that is how it is happening. Now, micro credential is probably going to be more focused on professional oriented. It may not be fully addressing the vocational needs, right? And so it may be for better skills. So people who are graduating from JDU, they may be able to know the subject matter but not speak well. right? And so some of that skills are, will be able to be enhanced through microcredential.
If public communication, or say, for example, something that NEP also talks about in terms of having, those who are doing PhDs, the students who are doing PhD research, they need to have some basic understanding of teaching and learning pedagogy. Okay, so some kind of micro credential course for doctoral students in teaching and learning pedagogy will be entering the, higher education teaching sector. Something like that, I
Correct,
guess.
exactly, absolutely. So I'll give you another example. My driver, car driver, it's been from here to station to Delhi and back, the regular driver. His son, he is doing some sales type of job, right? And he was doing Dell, or he was doing customer support service. So now he wants to do data analysis, okay? And perfect for him, right? So for him to take a micro-credential program that he learns about data analysis and how to apply data science techniques so that he can upgrade himself, right? He can get a better salary than for being on the phone. Not that being on the phone is a bad thing, but how do they upskill themselves, right? That for those kind of things is perfect, right? So there is a whole host of that. Similarly, nursing, right? If somebody is a general nurse and if they want to become a cardiology specialist, right? That is a perfect thing for micro-credential. So it's not just limited to technology or even theory. If you want to learn more about economics, right? If you're a general BA economics and you're writing policy papers, but you want to learn more about econometrics or behavioral economics, that's a great example of what professional person can learn, and that can
Somebody who's already in the profession, getting micro credentials to upgrade their, as you mentioned, like for nursing, you have to go through a professional training already. But once you're in the profession, you need some more specialized training to actually be a nurse in the OT. Everybody can't be a OT nurse doing assisting to research.